All right, clarity and width within rock and metal mixes. It's something that we all want. The problem is, most of us screw it up. Either we make things overly complicated or we completely neglect to focus on the important things that actually make a real difference. Now, if you're looking for extra clarity and width within your mixes, maybe it's something that you can never seem to achieve, this is the video for you. I want you producing better results today, right now. So let's dive on in. All right, so without any further ado, I'm going to play an audio sample back for you. It's about 40 seconds long. It's of a production that I'm currently working on right now. And I want you to pay close attention specifically to the clarity of the mix, as well as the width of the mix. When I'm done playing back the sample, I'm going to share with you some of the key areas, some of the key techniques that I'm utilizing to achieve these results so you can do the same in your tracks. If you're producing rock or metal, I don't care what subgenre you're producing, these will make a massive difference, believe me. And be sure to stick around for the last technique. I think you're going to find it very surprising. Most people don't think to do it, and it does make a huge difference. So with that being said, let's play the sample and pay attention. Let's check it out. All right, so that right there is a sample of a production I'm currently working on. It's a song called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows by my band King Kelly. This song should have been done a long time ago, but I've been held up building my new studio, and it's finally being wrapped up right now, along with 3 other new songs. It feels good to play music again, I'm gonna be honest. I'll be sharing more information on when this will be released, so stay tuned to the channel. So this mix here is about 80% done, but the clarity and width is already there. And that's what I want to talk about. So the first thing you're going to want to do if you're looking for extra clarity and width in your mix, and it's so simple, yet for some reason, especially this year, a lot of the mixes that people send me have this problem, you're going to want to hard pan your drum overhead tracks. And this applies to both program drums and live drum tracks. Now these here are live drum tracks that I recorded in my garage, but again, it really doesn't matter where the drums were recorded. Let's isolate the drums for a second. So right here, I have my left overhead and right overhead. They are hard panned. I even have my ride panned, my hats panned. And I also want to mention this, even if you have stereo room tracks, hard pan your stereo rooms. People, I think, are scared of doing this because they don't want their drums to sound overly separate and maybe overly bombastic and huge. But here's the thing, unless you're recording in a huge room, which honestly, most of us are not, or maybe you're mixing an 80s drum machine where the samples aren't from a live kit and the cymbals are literally separate cymbal samples that you're triggering, unless you're in one of those situations, you're going to generally want to wide pan your overheads, or I would say even hard pan them. Now, I get pushback a lot. People will say, well, yeah, your cymbals are going to sound too separate. We have to remember, there's crosstalk. Again, unless your kit is gigantic, like 15 feet wide, 20 feet wide, your overheads are 4 to 5 feet apart, maybe even 3 feet apart, 6 feet apart. A lot of the stuff that's happening here is getting in this mic, and a lot of the stuff that's happening here is getting into this microphone. So there's natural crosstalk. Think of the overhead sort of as your ears. We have 2 ears, so overheads are sort of the same thing. That's how I like to think of it. And the same thing goes for stereo room microphones. Unless you have one room microphone, like, 40 feet away in one direction and 40 feet away in the other direction, you can really hard pan them, and it's going to sound actually more natural than panning them in most cases. And I'm saying this because a lot of the mixes that people send me, the drums sound odd and mono. And when I dive into their productions, they're panning their cymbals in because some yo-yo on YouTube is telling them to do that. Don't listen to that yo-yo, listen to this yo-yo. So that's number one. Hard pan your overheads and room tracks. If they sound weird and overly huge for some crazy reason, you could pan them in a little, but I'm gonna be honest with you, 9 times out of 10, I would say 9.9 times out of 10, I hard pan my overheads and room tracks to create a wider and clearer stereo image. Because I want those high frequencies to be nice and clear. I don't want them fighting up the center. And cymbals, or most of your high frequency content, comes from. Think about it. Okay, and this leads me into number 2. Reserve the center of your mix for your kick drum, bass guitar, snare, and vocals. So in this mix here, I have my bass up the center, kick up the center, vocals up the center, snare up the center, and almost every single other track, except for lead guitars that are not even happening in the chorus, is hard panned. I'm a huge fan of LCR panning, but even if you have something against LCR panning, reserve the center for the instruments I just mentioned. Vocals are the most important instrument. If you have heavy guitars fighting against the vocal, it's gonna be hard for it to be clear. And again, a lot of the times when people feel like their mixes are too small or cluttered or unclear, it's because they don't understand panning. Or again, they're listening to someone on YouTube that doesn't produce real productions. I hate to say it. If you're mixing heavy music, use LCR panning for most of your panning and reserve the center for those instruments. Again, vocals, bass guitar, snare drum, and kick drum for most of your mix. Okay, this leads me into number 3 if you're looking for a nice, wide, and clear mix. And it's really simple, and I'm practicing it here within this production. You ready? Keep your processing and your routing straightforward. In other words, avoid overly complicated mixing techniques that you don't fully understand yet. All right, let's listen once more. So super simple. All of my drum tracks, except for my cymbals and my room, so all of my actual drum shells, are going to a drum submix with a little bit of EQ and a tape saturator, which is acting more like a clipper. After that, it's going straight to my master bus. I'm not using any sidechain compression. I'm not using any parallel compression. Again, I do use those in certain productions, but it's not always necessary. And oftentimes when I hear mixes that kind of sound weird and artificial, it's because people are overdoing these techniques. The way I look at it is if the mix doesn't need it, it doesn't need it. Especially if you're going for something a little more on the organic and live kind of side. My rhythm guitars are just going to a guitar submix straight to the output, and honestly my vocals don't even have a vocal submix. They're just the individual tracks going straight to the output of my mix, the master bus. And this also applies for the processing. The drums only had 2 plugins on the submix. My guitars only have 1, just a multiband compressor. My vocals have none because they're not even being submixed. They're being processed individually, but just not through a submix. And then I have my master bus chain, which is dead simple. A compressor, a little bit of an EQ here, just dipping out a few dB in the lower mids and the deep subs, a tape saturator, and then a limiter that's doing nothing. There's no gain reduction happening. That's there just to bring up the level of the mix before I master the mix. So many issues can be solved by just keeping your mix simple. And as things have gotten more complicated and as more plugin companies are trying to push random plugins and the more YouTube mix tutorials that are out there you consume, people tend to overcomplicate mixing. We should be focusing on the basics. Okay, now we're gonna get into some of the interesting stuff here that most people really neglect to pay attention to. So pay attention, we have 2 more. All right, so let me skip ahead to that heavy chuggada part at the end of the song. The song here is very open. There's distorted guitar happening, but it's not chuggada-ing. It's not heavy. Until the end. Now, a lot of viewers of my channel are metal producers or they're producing heavy music, which is what I'm producing 85% of the time. And one problem that I see and hear quite often is the lack of low-end control on the sides of the mix. Now, luckily for us, within the rock and metal genres, most of the low end that's happening throughout the duration of your mixes is going to be your rhythm guitars. I want you to pay close attention. I'm gonna play the end of this chorus into the very end of the song where there's some chunking happening, some chugging happening, and listen closely. So the song gets heavy at the end for a few seconds. There's some heavy kick drum happening, some chugging on the guitar. That kicks in, and the mix doesn't fall apart and get muddy. The thing I hear a lot is a lot of excess uncontrolled low end on the sides of people's mixes, and it's typically due to rhythm guitars being out of control. So a lot of times people will ask me, okay, well, should I thin out my rhythm guitars? The problem is then your rhythms are gonna sound overly thin and anemic. And then people will ask me, okay, should I use all this crazy stuff like sidechain compression from my kick and bass and rhythm guitars? You don't have to make your life complicated. It's really simple. All you need to utilize if you want to keep your guitars nice and open and natural yet in control is a multi-band compressor. Now, if you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you're probably familiar with this technique. I stole it from Andy Sneap, sort of like a standard mixing technique within metal and rock. And honestly, it's for good reason. It works so well. So at the end of the track, I'm gonna play those chugs again. Right before the chugs, you're gonna notice this compressor's not doing much. And then once the chugs happen, you see some gain reduction right in this range. I've got between 90 hertz and 250, 300-ish hertz. It really doesn't matter. As long as you're in that low end zone, the upper part of the subs or the lower part of the lower mids around 100 hertz, that's where the chugs really get out of control. Check it out. And there you go. So my guitars are uncompressed throughout the entire track. And when the chugging happens, only that section of the frequency spectrum is reduced and controlled. And that keeps my mix nice and wide and clear, because I've found that when there's a lot of uncontrolled low end on the sides of your mix, you end up with a smaller, cloudier, less clear and defined mix. So that's number 4. Use a multi-band compressor on your rhythm guitars. Left and right guitars. Some DAWs have these plugins for free. I know Reaper has a really good one for free. I'm using Pro Tools, which does not have a multiband compressor for free, so I'm using the old Waves C4. It doesn't really matter what you use as long as it's a multiband compressor. Utilize it, you won't be sorry. Okay, and this leads me to the big tamale, the bonus technique here that I hardly ever hear people talk about, and it's a shame. You ready? Okay. If you want an ultra wide mix without having to pull out your hair, do this. Switch up the IR that you're using on your left and right guitars. So in this mix, I haven't committed my amp sims yet. I'm gonna be committing them soon before I start mastering. If we go to my IRs, on my left guitar, I'm using an SM57, and on my right guitar, I'm also using an SM57, but it's of a slightly different microphone placement. So same microphone, it's actually from the same IR pack. It's from my IR pack, which by the way, you could download for absolutely free. There's a link below in this video's description, and you could actually use the same IRs that I'm using in this video, but I've intentionally varied the impulse responses in my left and right guitars. Now, I don't always do this. It's not always necessary, but for this production, I wanted a super wide yet natural organic sound. If you're recording real amps, which I do as well, I'll often do a similar thing where I'll mic a cab with 2 microphones. So for one track, I could use one microphone placement, and for the other track on the right, I use a slightly different microphone placement. What ends up happening here is you end up with an ultra wide guitar sound, which makes your mix ultra wide due to the subtle tonal variations of the microphone placement and a subtle shift in phase of maybe the room that you're recording in and the way the speaker reacts with the microphone itself. Microphone placement is tricky. Even if you move a microphone half of an inch on a speaker cab, it makes a world of difference. So both of these IRs work independent of one another. You could easily use one of these two, but I wanted the guitars to sound ultra wide, and that's why I'm using 57 number 4 on the left and 57 number 3 on the right. Give it a shot. And again, you could download these for absolutely free. There's a link below in this video's description. Don't combine the impulse responses, use one for one guitar and one for another. Again, mixing really isn't rocket science. It's not complicated. It's all about focusing on the things that actually matter and cutting out all the crap that's distracting so many of us because of all of the overwhelming amount of information available online. Now, if you're looking to produce pro level results with the gear you're currently using, I want you producing amazing results today. And because of this, I'm offering you direct access right now for absolutely free to my free training, 4 dead simple ways to massively improve your recordings and mixes. In this exclusive training, I share with you my #1 technique for prepping heavy guitar tracks that virtually mix themselves. You'll also learn how to create instantaneous clarity within your mix using any old stock EQ plugin. You'll finally learn how to take control over the levels in your mix so that instruments stop fighting with one another. And I also throw in my technique for crafting radio-ready vocal mixes using only stock plugins. Now, I'm gonna be honest here, full disclosure, if you're one of these people that's constantly scrolling through TikTok and you have the attention span of a squirrel, don't waste your time, don't waste my time, and don't even bother registering for the training. This training is meant for people who are serious like I am about audio production. Now, if you are one of the exceptional few that are serious and you'd like to dive deeper with me, there's a link below in this video's description where you can register for the training for absolutely free. And I'll see you there. Okay, so I'm curious to know, what did you think of these techniques? Were you utilizing these techniques within your own productions? Were these techniques that you never even thought to use? Maybe they seemed overly simplistic and so obvious that you just never implemented them? Let me know by leaving a comment in the comment section of this video. I'd love to hear what you've been up to in your studio. Now, I know things have been slow on this channel recently because this entire year I've been spending so much time building my new studio, but the good news is that we're finally almost sort of done. I'm hoping to have the studio up and running by the end of the year. I'm super pumped. I can't wait. And there will be an in-depth YouTube series where I share the entire build process of this studio. It's been insane. So if this interests you, stick around, stay tuned to the channel. We're gonna have fun together. Until next time, drink that, Spindrift.